In February of last year, 2025, I made an awful series of choices while driving that could have cost me everything. I've uploaded several videos years prior to this incident that spoke about the importance of maintaining one's composure on the road, a culmination of advice I wanted others to take from that I was one day not composed enough to follow myself. One morning, as I was driving home from a store, I came to a stop at a traffic light where there were two lanes of vehicles heading in the same direction. And from that light, the two lanes would eventually taper into one about a half mile further up the road. Before coming to stop at the light, another vehicle cut me off to get in front of me, nearly making contact with the front end of my vehicle. At that point, no wrong was really done, aside from perhaps a lack of cognizance from the other driver. No damage was done to either of our vehicles. Nothing happened that couldn't be forgiven and quickly forgotten about. Against better judgment, I grew incensed at this other person's horrible spatial awareness, which, while a bit absent-minded, it was no crime. That didn't stop me from taking it to a point in my head where I convinced myself I was wronged and would refuse to let go of it. From behind my wheel, waiting for the light to turn green, I cursed at the other driver, gesturing rudely to them, and grew even angrier when I wasn't acknowledged, as if I were entitled to an apology from them. I was committing to worse and worse unhinged man-child behavior that continued and escalated even after traffic began moving again. I drove dangerously close to the bumper of this driver in front of me, unable to see how quickly I was turning a nothing situation into a terrible one, and it only got worse. My goal was to somehow overtake the other driver to get in front of them, which my childish thinking would have thought I achieved some victory in righting a wrong that was never done. But when I was unable to and forced to remain behind the other driver, I could feel myself closing in on exploding and losing all manner of sense to not take the situation even further. I continued to stay inches away from their bumper, still shouting like a deranged maniac over my steering wheel. As we approached another light where the lanes spread out once more to two lanes, one to the right for traffic flowing straight ahead and the other for left turns only, the driver in front of me began to turn into the right lane. The moment I noticed their shifting to the lane, I pressed more heavily on the gas and sharply maneuvered left to make a rushed approach alongside their vehicle. Once close enough, I jerked my wheel sharply to the right and swerved at them, admittedly to intimidate this person at first. Another moment later, with half my vehicle now perpendicular to theirs, I swerved a second time, intentionally hitting their vehicle. Upon impact, I slammed hard on my brakes, my passenger window aligned with their driver window, where we looked at one another. My face was contorted in fury, and the other driver's face was jaw-dropped in disbelief at what I just did to them. Before speeding off from the area, which is a crime, fleeing the scene of an accident, I screamed, "Fucking bitch," delusional in thinking I was justified in resorting to vehicular violence over being cut off. I was without any sense to fathom that this instance of road rage wasn't going away. I had committed several crimes. Plenty of witnesses saw what I had done, and I was unquestionably at fault. But instead, my only concern was whether or not I could get away with picking up a coffee before heading home. I drove around aimlessly contemplating the decision when I came to yet another light at an intersection a couple miles from where I hit the driver. I saw a speeding cruiser with its blue lights flashing, making its way quickly up the road to the right. He stopped where he also had a red light. He spotted me from across the intersection, pointed his finger at me, commanding I come towards him. Directly ahead of me was an empty lot of an out-of-service gas station where I calmly drove and parked, waiting for the officer to come speak to me. It had finally caught up to me. All the moments I had ever acted like a psychotic fool behind the wheel and gotten away with built up to this moment where I'd finally have to be held accountable for my reckless driving. The only way I could help myself now was being honest with the officer, taking full accountability for what I did, and describing the incident precisely how it happened. Lying or acting aloof as if I didn't know what I did would do me no favors. Somehow, and thankfully, I was not placed in handcuffs and put in the back of his cruiser after being charged with negligent operation, marked lanes violation, and fleeing the scene of an accident. In early September of 2025, I would have to appear in court for a probable cause hearing and have another court date scheduled to determine the punishment for the charges. The lawyer appointed to me was a great guy, but his job was to help me create a defense to receive as lenient of a sentencing as possible. At the time, it was true that I had been without my mental health medications for several days leading up to the incident due to insurance discrepancies and certainly exacerbated symptoms of my anxiety and aggression as a result. But regardless, my decision to victimize someone else in their own moving vehicle on a busy road was inexcusable, and I had no valid enough reason for doing it. It was immoral, short-sighted, and cruel. I could have lost my license, making going to and from work a challenge that may have led to me unable to work, unable to provide for my family, who I obviously wasn't thinking about at the time I made these poor choices. I thought only about myself and how much I thought acting this way would make me feel better somehow. If these were crimes I had been charged with before, or charged with again, it would carry a penalty of giving up my license and 2 to 4 years time served in prison at a minimum. How this would all turn out plagued my every thought, and rightly so, for months until it came time to make my court appearance. By the grace of God and the leniency of the judge, I was sentenced to only paying a few $100s to the Commonwealth as my debt to society for being a menace. But it could have taken much more from me. Things I couldn't afford to get back, the job I love, and potentially even break apart the family I have. I'm not revealing all of this to pat myself on the back for coming clean about my hypocrisy, though I do think is important and deserved for anyone under the impression that I was a saint behind the wheel, but because this is as honest as I can ever speak about road rage and how life-changing being angry while driving can be. Road rage increases by the day, and so does our exposure to it. People's lives, entire families sometimes, are changed forever by it in ways that are often resulting in utter and tragic loss. I want this to open the eyes of anyone who deals with road rage as bad or worse than I had, that the price for violent misconduct on the road is severe and is dealt with seriously by whichever court will process your crimes. It will never be worth the cost of your quality of life to act unlawfully on ideas of self-obsessed, rogue justice you might think someone else deserves because they honked their horn at you or cut you off. I was fortunate that what I did didn't result in injury for the other driver. Lucky that what I did didn't provoke them to act defensively, potentially pulling out a firearm and shooting at me, which I wouldn't be able to blame them for, but may have not been around to do so anyways. There is nothing that will ever happen between you and other strangers on the road in their cars that is worth giving up potentially so much for a situation that no one walks away from winning anything. Also, it's unlikely they would ever see this, but to the person who I victimized on that day, an apology to you is not nearly enough, but it's all I'm able to extend. You did nothing to have ever deserved what I did to you, what it may have caused you psychologically, how it may have even made the daily task of driving a fearful thing to bring yourself to do from that moment. And it was evil and selfish, and I'm terribly sorry I put you at the receiving end of my own problems. Thank you for listening.